This is the Sigma 135mm f1.8, a medium telephoto prime, and quite possibly the best portrait lens out there. Before we get into the specifics of this lens, let's chat for a minute about portrait lenses. Some of you just heard what I said, and you might be thinking, I thought the 50mm lens was best for portraits, or I picked up an 85 on somebody's recommendation as the best portrait lens. And those focal lengths are really nice. So is the 35 and the 200, and the 135, and even the 24. Those are all acceptable portrait lenses, but generally it's accepted that longer focal lengths provide a more flattering look for people. That's what portrait photography is all about. Now, some of you might not like that oversimplification because truthfully, it's more about the distance you can get from your subject to camera and filling the frame that really impacts the look you get. But a lens like the 135 allows you, as I said, to fill the frame with your subject and be at a distance that gives very pleasing results. That, coupled with the fact that this lens offers f1.8, it's a nice wide aperture that will really blur the background when you want to. It's also exceptionally sharp at that aperture. It's also weather sealed, and like the other Sigma lenses in the Art series, it's well built. It's got no issues with flaring or chromatic aberration that I saw in any of my testing. And autofocus is snappy if it's on the right body. And you get all of this in a relatively affordable package at $1,400. So that leads me back to my original statement that this is quite possibly the best portrait lens out there if you shoot outside with Canon or Nikon. We'll get to those caveats in a second, but first, inside, I think you're going to find yourself running out of space except for the tightest of headshots or in a larger studio. You're just going to be working at a little bit further distances to get 3/4 lengths or more of your subject in this. Now, I did mostly shoot and test this lens on a Sony a7R II using the Sigma MC11 adapter. I can't recommend it. IAF works, which is nice, like native glass. I love the Sigma MC11 adapter, and with my 50 and my 70-200, it works very well. I haven't found it to work very well with the 135. It's slow, autofocus is somewhat unreliable, and more hunting than I would like. And yes, my MC11 firmware is up to date with the Sigma 135 on the compatibility list, but it seems to need a little bit more work, Sigma. On Canon or Nikon, you're going to be just fine. The autofocus is nice and snappy, though it's possible you're going to need to do some micro focus adjustments or use the Sigma dock that is compatible with this lens. Now, while I have not personally compared the Sigma 135 f1.8 to the Canon 135 f2, I know from reviewers I trust the Sigma is sharper, especially at the edges, and doesn't have nearly the issues, or doesn't have issues, I should say, with chromatic aberration or flaring that you do see in the Canon. And the Canon 135 is not weather sealed. I do want to take a few moments and look at a few of my favorite shots that I've captured with this lens. This is one of my favorite images from the shoot, and I think really nicely illustrates what having a long and fast aperture lens can do for you. So at 135mm f1.8, Chloe was about 10 feet away. I was shooting through some leafy branches. Those were just a couple of inches in front of the lens, and you can see how lovely and softly rendered they are. We zoom in. We can see that Chloe is sharp. We can zoom in even a little bit more. And even at f1.8, this is an incredibly sharp lens. Now we're looking at a comparison of the Sigma 50 Art versus the 135 that we're talking about in this video. Clearly, I've moved much closer to Chloe on the left model to keep her in that same kind of framing and size. And while both I think are nice portraits, I really prefer the look of the 135. Not only does the background get a little bit softer, but so do her proportions. Just seems to work very nicely for me. I was also interested in comparing the Sigma versus something like the Canon 70-200 f2.8 IS Mark II, which is a fantastic and very versatile lens. We could have a longer discussion, but if you already own that Canon 70-200 or the latest Nikon 70-200, which is a lot more, I don't think you need the Sigma 135. But if you don't own that 70-200 and you're looking for a longer range telephoto prime, this 135 is extremely hard to beat. Not only is it sharp, as we've seen already, but I just love the rendering of the background. So on the left, we've our light situation has changed here, but on the left, quite soft in the background, but the 135 to me, just a little bit softer. Notice in the kind of the foreground how nicely out of focus that's rendered, and at f2.8 you start to get a little bit more texture in there. You might like that. That's totally fine. I think that's a personal preference, but I really love the colors and contrast that we get out of the 135, even when shooting in a more backlit scene like this. When we zoom in on the hair, there is absolutely no chromatic aberration, no flaring, really nice, and of course, again, just another illustration of just how sharp this lens is. So outdoor portrait photographers who like to shoot backlit or want those shots with a creamy background and the colors and contrasts are fantastic, this lens is awesome. However, if you're a Sony user hoping to use this with an MC11 adapter, I can't recommend it at this time. Hopefully future firmware updates will make this work better like it does with many of their other Sigma lenses. You can see more shots of Chloe and additional sample images I've taken with this lens, along with a list of all of my favorite portrait lenses, linked right down below this video. And huge thanks to Chloe for helping me out on a Saturday. You can follow her on Instagram. That's linked right down below as well. And I'd love it if you hit the thumbs up or down button and leave a comment. What's your favorite portrait lens? Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Bye.